So, do you understand Hak Ja Han Moon? Do you understand our true mother? Do you understand her? Maybe we all have slightly different understandings. Does the world understand her?
Work in progress.
Does God understand her?
It's amazing.
Do her children understand her? So, this book, this is her autobiography, okay? So, at the bottom here, there are a few words which I thought were significant. Why has she written this book? So she says this: "For the first time I am opening up a window into my life. I do so with the hope that the story of my life, lived in accordance with God's love, will inspire in others the same mission, passion, devotion, and dream." So I've highlighted these words. A life lived in accordance with God's love. And she wants, through her life, to inspire us to have the same mission, the same passion, the same devotion, and the same dream. So, what do these words mean? I thought if I look into the definition of them, or a definition I would give, for example, what is God's love? You could say it's giving without expecting anything in return. Yeah? I mean, true love. You give and you give and you give with a pure heart. So, this is how she's lived her life. And she wants us to live the same way of life. Also, mission, you could say an important assignment given to a person. God chose her for this mission. We who joined the Family Federation, we also have a mission, an important assignment. Passion, great enthusiasm. So, all her life, this passion has stayed with her to fulfill God's will. We also need to maintain that passion. Devotion, complete faith and dedication. She has supported our true father throughout her whole life, once she met him. Dedicated to do God's will, with complete faith, no doubts, no doubt at all. And dream, something you wish and hope to achieve someday. Her dream is to achieve a world of peace. It's the same with us, to build the kingdom of heaven on this earth. This is our dream. We're part of the Family Federation because this is God's dream, and we want to be part of it. So what makes us the way we are as adults? It all goes back to our childhood experiences. So I'd like to, from Mother's book, to look at her childhood experiences which actually shaped her to become the person she grew up to be. First of all, she has been chosen by God. Have we been chosen by God? Do you feel that? We should. I feel I've been chosen. Otherwise, why are we here? And feeling the presence of God. This is something from a very young age she felt God's presence. Have you felt God's presence in your life?
Yes.
Yes. God is with us. Whether we feel God or not, God is with us. And I would say in my life, I can definitely looking back, I feel God's guidance. But even today, I feel God's presence in my life. Living through war. So as a child, she lived through the Korean War. She lived under Japanese occupation. So she understands what it means when people suffer because of conflict. And that's why this dream of peace is like strongly within her, because she's gone through war. So let's begin with understanding that God has chosen her for this mission. We understand this thing about the merit of your ancestors. That we're here today because our ancestors did good things. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to respond. Or God wouldn't be able to work in our lives in the way God has. So Han Lan was a loyal patriot in the Han lineage. So I'd like to tell you the story. So this man, he built a bureau for agricultural administration in a district, in a certain district, and turned a large expanse of land into a productive farmland. When a war between Korean rulers broke out, Hwang Geon, who was a nobleman and a military general, he passed through this place on the way to battle. And Han Lan greeted him and fed his army of 100,000 soldiers. Now, I don't know if that was the accurate number, but he fed all these soldiers and joined them in the battlefield. And so once Hwang Geon became king, he declared that Han Lan a loyal patriot. And Han Lan's reputation as a founding contributor to the kingdom has endured through the ages. And 33 generations after Han Lan, mother was born. So that's the lineage of a loyal patriot and a founding member of the Han lineage. And then there's a Dalai Bridge legend. So this bridge was an important connection between China and Korea, but during a storm it was broken down, destroyed. But the local authorities didn't have the money to rebuild it, and so they asked, the people who lived there, can somebody help to rebuild this? So actually, grandfather Jo Han Jun, who's a direct ancestor of mother's grandmother, her maternal grandmother, he actually he used his personal wealth to rebuild the bridge. And so he spent his entire fortune on this task, and when it was done, all he had left were 3 brass coins. These were just enough to pay for the new straw sandals that he needed in order to properly attend the bridge dedication ceremony the next day. That night he had a dream of a grandfather in white clothes who came to him and said, Han Jun, your sincere devotion has moved heaven. I was expecting to send you a son of heaven to your family. However, because of you bought the sandals, I will send you to your family the princess of heaven. So because of the merit of these ancestors, that's why our true mother could be chosen by God. And she was born on February the 10th, 1943 in Anju in northern Korea during World War II. And at that time, Korea was occupied by the Japanese. So she was born not into a peaceful situation. And when she was born, her mother had a spiritual experience. When she fell asleep, and then she had a dream of Satan. And this being, this evil presence, said to her, "You must kill your baby tonight. If this child lives, the world will be in serious trouble." What a shock. Yes. Actually, 1 week later, another figure appeared in the room, like an angel, and said to her, "This baby is the daughter of the Lord, and you are her nanny. Devote all your energies to raising her with absolute faith, love, and obedience." And her mother took this very seriously. And so her mother said, "I must raise this child with complete devotion. I will raise her to become a pure and beautiful girl for the Lord and protect her from the pollution of the secular world." So right from before her birth and when she was born, she was a special child, and Satan, evil, did not want her to live. So our mother is an only daughter of 3 generations. So her grandmother, Won Mojo, her maternal grandmother, and her maternal grandfather, Yuil Hong. I don't have a picture of him, but they are the grandparents. And then her mother, Soon Hei Hong, and her father, Soon Un Han. And her mother has a brother called Soon Jong Hong, the uncle. And so Hak Ja Han was born. So let me explain a bit, because her father did not live with them. So they were married in the New Jesus Church. It was a kind of spirit-filled church. And as I said, March the 5th, 1934. They were married, on March the 5th, 1934. But Hak Ja Han was not born until 9 years later. So that unusually long interval elapsed, not because my parents were infertile, she says, but because they were living separately, each engrossed in their lives of faith. Both of them were very faithful Christians. And for my father, he had a career as an educator, and he taught in a province which was some distance from my maternal home. And my mother did not want to move there. My mother's intense devotion to Jesus led her to focus all of her time and attention on her church work. But there was another reason. My maternal grandparents, the Hongs, wished to make my father, Han Sung-un, their heir, but he did not accept it. As the eldest son of the Han family, his parents did not allow him to put his roots down in his wife's home. So she would not move with him, nor him with her. But God wanted me to be born. And so I arrived in my grandparents' home in Anju, where I grew up. An unusual situation. Didn't have a father with her. So she was chosen by God. But throughout her childhood, she felt the presence of God. She was born, as I say, in Anju. This is a modern picture of where she comes from. I don't know if it looks the same today, but this is what Mother says. She's about her hometown. She says, more than 70 years have passed, but the beautiful scenery and the soothing sounds of Anju remain in my heart. My hometown holds many beautiful memories for me, and I want to go back there. So she had a very secure early childhood. So that's what we all need, don't we? We need. So even though her father wasn't there, she felt very comfortable, loved, and very content. And she says this: I was always content because I knew that God was my father and that he was always right there by my side, taking care of me. And her mother and grandmother had a deep Christian faith. She says, I was born into this intensely spiritual family, an intensely spiritual environment, and grew up in constant rapport with God. My grandmother and my mother set the example for me, obeying God absolutely and wholeheartedly. They offered their devotions of prayer most earnestly and carefully. And why were they so passionate? Because their sole focus was on receiving the Lord of the Second Advent. Because at that time in Korea, there were several churches, new churches sprung up, that received revelation that the Lord of the Second Advent would be born in Korea. And they were excited and they believed this and they were dedicated. So these three churches, first there was the New Jesus Church, which is where her parents were married. This was founded by the Reverend Lee Yong-do, but actually he died when he was only 33. And so that church didn't really continue. So then her mother and grandmother found another church, the Holy Lord Church, and this was founded by Mrs. Kim Song-dok, but actually she was imprisoned by the Japanese. So these churches were not very popular, according to the Japanese, yes, because they were not a Christian nation. And then she went to another church, and she died in 1944. So again, had to find another church. And then she found inside the Womb Church. This is the church where the founder, called Mrs. Ho Oh Bin, felt something inside of her. It was like a baby was moving. And it was a sign that the new Messiah, the second advent of Christ, would be born through a woman. But actually, she was imprisoned by the communists, and She died there in 1946. So, as I said, Hak Ja Han was born in 1943. Korea was occupied by the Japanese. But in 1945, at the end of the World War II, it also meant the end of Japanese occupation. But at that time, Korea was then divided because the communists came in from China. And it was divided at the 38th parallel. And so this is her father, who lived in another place. But actually, because the communists were taking over, he could see that we cannot stay here in the north. We have to go south. So he says, in 1947, mother says, I was 4 years old when my father suddenly appeared at our home to announce, conditions are not going to improve here. I cannot have my family live in North Korea. Let us go south. But because her mother and grandmother believed that where they were living, this is where the Messiah will come. We have to stay here. So actually, they stayed, and because they stayed, in 1948, they were imprisoned for nearly 2 weeks for being members of the Inside the Womb Church. And so mother, as a child, she used to come there, to visit, and she would give some cookies to the soldiers, and somehow the soldiers liked her, and for some reason they were freed. And so the uncle also, he didn't live in that part of Korea. He lived in the south, in Seoul, and he was part of the military. So in 1948, the family left Anju in the middle of the night to go to Seoul, where their uncle was. And when they got there, they were actually looking for him, where could he be? And then they met a friend of his on the street. And he then took them to the military place and met him there. And so he could help actually to get a flat for them to live in, like a miracle, like God's guidance. Okay? So, but of course, to travel, they had to travel a long distance. It would take maybe 3 days of walking if you would walk non-stop, about 200 kilometers away. But you can see people bring whatever they can, and they're going through these difficult conditions. And as they were traveling, they managed to get across the border into the south. And so mother, she said, oh, now we can sing. We don't need to sing these communist songs anymore. We can sing another song. So she started singing this song, which I have here, called Sang Toki. Have you heard of it? So I'm going to play this now, this little song, if I can get this right. No.
We have two can sing here.
We can have a live performance.
No, actually, I haven't got it. Yeah, there it is. There it is. Got it. No. Santoki. So I lost it. Not to worry. Santoki. But these are the words. Santoki, Toki, Ya, and so on. In English, mountain bunny, oh bunny, where do you go? Boing boing, while you jump, where do you go? You know, a happy 6-year-old girl singing a song. But nearby there were some soldiers, and then they stopped. And the soldiers were actually South Korean soldiers. But they heard a rustling in the trees. But because they heard the voice of a child singing, then they didn't shoot. And this is what mother says. If I had not sung at that moment, those young soldiers probably would have mistaken us for North Korean soldiers and shot us dead. In this way, once again, God protected us. So, in 1950, on the 25th of June, the North Korean army crossed the 38th parallel. The Korean War began, and 2 days later, the family left Seoul. So then war started, and they had to cross this bridge. So this is called the Han River Bridge. On the evening of June the 27th, 2 days after the start of the Korean War, Seoul residents streamed out of the city. My grandmother, my mother, and I joined the exodus towards the Han River Bridge. And this was in the dark. But something told me to stop, Mother says. And I grabbed my grandmother's skirt, and she stopped in her tracks. And my mother turned and asked me, "Mother, what's wrong?" And grandmother looked up at the sky and then glanced down at me, and then she turned her head again in the direction of our house and said, "My brother, your uncle Soon Jong, may come. Let's go back in case he does." The three of us made our way back home, and when we got home, I spread out my blanket and lay down to sleep. But it was not long before I was awakened by the noise of a 3/4-ton truck. Its headlights illuminated our room as the door suddenly burst open. There was my uncle in his military uniform. My grandmother and my mother gasped sighs of relief and hope. I thought to myself, "We can leave now and feel at ease." "Hurry," he barked. "We have to move now." So my uncle, based in the army headquarters as a military medic, was aware of the progress of the war, and as soon as he heard that the South Korean army was preparing to destroy the River Han Bridge, he requisitioned a truck and sped to our home, knowing his family was in danger. Honking the horn, he inched the truck through the crowd. Held in my mother's arms, I clung to her and gazed at the people fleeing their homes, their fear and confusion increasing by the minute. As soon as we had crossed the bridge, my uncle shouted, "Get down in your seats!" As I squeezed down on the floor at my mother's feet, a huge explosion behind us shook our truck. There was a blue flash and a deafening sound. My uncle set the emergency brake and turned off the engine. Together we jumped out of the truck and clambered down into the ditch at the side of the road. I turned my face to the bridge and witnessed the next explosion. I saw a light like a demon's eyes burning, piercing the night. Countless civilians, as well as soldiers and policemen who were crossing the bridge, were thrown about like plastic toys, flying everywhere, cast into the river below. For us, a few meters proved to be the difference between life and death, and our lives had been spared. Can you imagine? She's 6 years of age. She's had a happy childhood. Then she has to move and move again. But to see this, what a shock. So this actually is a photograph of what's left of the bridge at that time. So the River Han Bridge to Seoul was blown up by the South Korean army on June the 28th, 1950 to prevent the North Korean army from crossing. Hundreds of people fleeing the city were killed, and this desperate crisis, through the help of my uncle, my life and the lives of my family were preserved. At that critical moment, God guided me and protected us from danger. It took place 70 years ago, or actually more now, but my throat still tightens when I recall the night the Han River Bridge fell. So these are the horrors of war: explosions, refugees, people having nowhere to go or searching for a place to be. And of course, there are, in Ukraine and in the Middle East, every day people are dying and suffering needlessly. At a young age, she says, I directly witnessed the horror of war and experienced the wretched life of a refugee. I was only 7, but I became so serious that war has to vanish forever from this world. So True Mother's passion to bring peace on the earth is also rooted in her life experience. Sweden hasn't been at war for over a century, and Britain has not been at war since the Second World War, apart from in the Falkland Islands or or actually in the Middle East they've been sending soldiers, but actually England itself has not been at war. So aren't we lucky? But I think, Haida, you've experienced war?
Yeah.
Yes. So if you've experienced, but as a child, can you imagine? Let me continue. So, the next thing to happen. In 1951, on January the 4th, 500,000 Chinese troops invaded Korea and the family escaped to Daegu in the south. More effort to leave your home and to find a new place. And in 1954, Hak Ja Han moved to Jeju Island with her mother. Her mother did this because she wanted to protect her. Because when she was going to school, she was a very beautiful girl and the boys were interested in her, and she wanted to take her away and kind of to live on this island. And she says, I enrolled in Shinyo Elementary School as a 5th grader. At the age of 11, while my classmates were running around and playing, I lived a rigorous and strict life of faith. With my grandmother and my mother, I devoted myself to prayer, study and worship. And I read biographies of holy women and devoted myself to the ideal of complete purity. So her mother and grandmother were really protecting her and trying to instill in her a life of faith. And then in 1955, they left Jeju Island and moved to Chuncheon. And in December, her mother joined the Unification Church in Seoul. So her mother and her grandmother's search for the second coming of Christ came to the point of finding our true Father and the Unification Church. And then in 1956, at the age of 13, Hak Ja Han met Teacher Moon for the first time. So that's her story from her birth and to the time that she met our Father. So let's bring this to a summary. So I've looked at 3 aspects of her childhood. First, that she was chosen by God through the merit of her ancestors and protected by God during her life. Secondly, she was feeling the presence of God. Actually, her mother and grandmother told her, God is your father. And this was instilled into her, and she felt, yes, God is my father. My physical father is not here, but my real father is God. And also living through war and how that has affected her and given a strong desire to make Korea a peaceful country, and it's still divided. So let me return to what she said, why she wrote this book. For the first time, I'm opening up a window into my life. I do so with the hope that the story of my life, lived in accordance with God's love, will inspire in others the same mission, passion, devotion and dream. And these are the words that I've taken. And so this is her life, but she wants us to live a life with God's love, to have a sense of mission, to have a passion for what we do, to continue to have devotion and to maintain and keep the dream alive. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening. Thank you very much.